everyone. This is the class of 2021's Capstone project. This year, we researched community issues that were made worse by the pandemic, identified organizations that help people affected by these issues, and identified possible solutions to these issues. Putting People Back to Work by Cool Boys Club.
The pandemic has been a problem for 44-year-old Allison Dietrich, who cleans homes in New Orleans. All her clients canceled in spring when the pandemic hit, so she slashed her prices during the summer to lure some of them back. That has left Dietrich having to struggle with paying rent and other bills. There are emerging stories like Allison Dietrich all over America and the world. During the pandemic, the rates of unemployment and underemployment have increased dramatically. Unemployment has risen higher, especially in minorities, young workers, and low-income families. Later on, unemployment could lead to homelessness. We are trying to get as many people back to work as possible. We believe that everyone has the right to work and earn a livable wage. We'll hire people to teach others more about a certain subject in order to get them back into the workforce.
Let's frame the problem. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, unemployment and underemployment has been increasing in minorities, young workers, people with low income, and women with children. There are a number of behaviors that cause unemployment and underemployment. For example, businesses want trained employees and also want to maximize profits. A way businesses try to maximize profits is by lowering wages. Also, many people have not completed high school or college. The environmental factors that prevent people from getting a job is the pandemic, affordable housing, evictions, livable wages, such resistance to increase minimum wage, and stagnant wages.
During the pandemic, businesses have reduced demands for services, closed down, shortened hours, laid off employees, and also limited capacity. Due to this, most people who were employed are now unemployed. Citizenship is a major cause of people being unemployed. Being an immigrant, you have a higher chance of unemployment because there are 11 million undocumented immigrants who have no pandemic relief, minimum wage jobs, greater risk of COVID since 4 in 5 work essential jobs, face deportation, and have a higher risk of evictions. Americans ages 20 to 24 suffered the greatest job losses by far of any age group when many businesses closed. Many college-age workers and recent graduates work in low-paying retail and restaurant jobs. Mothers of children 6 to 17 experience high rates of unemployment because of school and child care centers closures. Less than 45% of mothers with children 6 to 12 regain employment.
There are many restraining forces that stop people from finding a job. Some of the forces are lack of training and education, age, transportation, the pandemic, and livable wages. There are also other factors that have helped increase unemployment rates. For example, people who have language barriers may face higher rates of underemployment. Also, those who lack connections, resources, and knowledge have a hard time finding a job. It's even more difficult if you have criminal records and or no citizenship to find a job.
Due to COVID-19, around 32% of adults ranging from 18 through 29 have lost their jobs because of restrictions or even pay cuts. Also, many COVID restrictions have caused businesses to shut down. According to the Center of Budget and Policy Priorities, joblessness remains high, and millions report that their household did not get enough to eat or are not caught up on rent payments. According to a survey from Pew Research Center in August 2020, 60% of people that took the survey are making less money than before the pandemic. 34% are making the same amount of money, and only 6% are making more money. The struggle for many mothers during COVID has been being able to have healthcare services provided for them and their children, as well as 75% of mothers have reported because of COVID, their children have had to stay home during work hours due to the lack of child daycare services. Pay cuts and layoffs have been the true issue during this pandemic, and our Black and Latino communities, as well as low income families, have experienced the brunt of this. With COVID restrictions and cities being forced to shut down, most businesses have been forced to either cut wages or fire employees in order to even stay in business. We developed an idea for a program called the Acceleration Program. It would help lower unemployment rates and also improve infrastructures such as building highways and schools. By updating the infrastructures, we could reduce car accidents and COVID-19 cases. We'll be able to help unemployed people, financially unstable people, Hispanics and African Americans, as well as low income struggling families. The span of our program will last 2 years after the end of the pandemic. Thank you.
Homelessness by cars. Homelessness. 580,000 people are homeless. 39% of the homeless is identified as Black. 23% of the homeless is identified as Hispanic or Latino. People in the U.S. are homeless because lack of affordable housing, unemployment, and evictions. Unemployment rates grew as some industries, including restaurants, retail, and hospitality, essentially shut down for varying periods of time. The economic effects of COVID-19 pandemic have been greater for low-income workers, renters, and minority households. The pandemic has increased the amount of people experiencing homelessness, and people that are experiencing homelessness have a higher chance of contracting or spreading the virus. Let's frame the problem. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen a surge in evictions and homelessness in the U.S. Black, Hispanic, and low-income people have been disproportionately affected by this crisis.
Decreasing dropout rates will help people obtain advanced degrees, making us and our children more educated about how we can help others who aren't in homes. If we can provide affordable tuition, we can have more educated people leading our future. By improving our job skills, we can obtain more advanced jobs such as lawyers and doctors. We can increase the availability of affordable housing so that less people will be. Only 35% of African Americans regained jobs since the pandemic. For Asians, it was 47%, being the second lowest. For Hispanics, it is 51%, and finally, for Caucasian people, it was 58%. During the recession, the unemployment rate in April 2020 spiked to 14.8%, meaning that more than a tenth of the working age population was unemployed. A couple months later, it settled back down to 6.7%. An American worker sees little to no growth in their weekly wages over 3 decades, and with the shrinking amount of houses that are actually affordable, they are more at risk of becoming homeless. There are also barriers to homeownership, such as supply shortages, down payment barriers, and tighter credit. If you don't have the money to keep up being in a household and you get behind on rent, you have to be evicted. They also have limited resources, meaning that they have to make hard choices like if they get to eat tonight with their children or not. Sources say that 30% of your income should be spent on rent, while most low income workers spend half of their income on rent. Higher unemployment rates for some minorities decrease the amount of money they have, leaving them unstable financially. That financial instability causes them to be behind on rent, which leaves them on the street or living with other family members.
The restraining forces that lead to homelessness are lack of affordable housing, stagnant wages, opposition to raising the minimum wage, and lack of government funding. Shelterforce.org conducted a survey of reasons why people are opposed to building affordable housing in their neighborhoods. Some of the top reasons were safety and crime, tax burdens, traffic concerns, school impacts, environmental impact, population served, and many others. Some of the other major factors that cause homelessness are loss of jobs/income with 22%, substance abuse with 14%, jail 13%, and eviction with 10%.
A staggering 11,448 are homeless in North Carolina. There are 1,303 homeless families in North Carolina, and 12% of North Carolina's population are chronically homeless. 15 million children, or 21% of all children, live in families below the federal poverty level. In the graph below, you can see the federal poverty level for different household sizes. For a family of 5, the federal poverty level is 31,800. Of North Carolina renters, 9.6% were at risk of eviction over a 2-month period. Racial inequality. African Americans make up more than 40% of the homeless population, but represent 13% of the general population. Homelessness is significantly defined by gender. 60% of all people experiencing homelessness are male. Amongst the individuals, the numbers are starker. 70% are men and accompanied by male youth.
In order to transition an individual or family out of homelessness, you must have access to affordable housing, appropriate services, and inadequate income. The North Carolina Coalition to End Homelessness program does this by supporting local communities and planning and implementing 10-year plans to end homelessness. Another thing they do is provide the homeless with health insurance through the NC SOAR program. The Housing Stability Assistance Program is helping the homeless rehouse, they assist with rent, and they improve housing for low-income families. The North Carolina Emergency Solutions Grant helps improve the number and quality of emergency shelters. They help provide essential services to shelter residents. They help rehouse homeless individuals and families. And they also help prevent families and individuals from becoming homeless.
Food insecurity by DHL.
Single parents have faced especially hard blow. Jessica Duke is a single mother who wakes up every day worried about having enough food for her teens. They eat ramen noodles or SpaghettiOs on a good night. It's all they can afford on $86 a week budget Duke received in unemployment aid from the state of North Carolina. Food insecurity is the state of being without reliable access to sufficient quantity or affordable nutritious food. Food Bank CNC states COVID-19 has caused a 38% increase in the portion of neighbors, working families, children, and seniors who struggle with food insecurity. This mostly affects minorities and low-income families. Approximately 756,320 people, or 1 in 5 people, have faced food hunger in 2020, including 250,570 children, or 1 in 3 children.
According to Frontiers.org, some environmental factors are loss of jobs, high rate of unemployment, homelessness, drug abuse, high cost of medical services, and unavailable or unaffordable food in one's surroundings. Anyone can experience food insecurity, but people who are most at risk are the poor, new immigrants, the underemployed, the homeless, and senior citizens.
Root causes. Something that plays a huge role with food insecurity is living in a place with high levels of poverty. More things that are a factor are lack of availability of healthy food in low-income neighborhoods, inadequate source of income, inadequate source of school-served meals, COVID-19, and long distance from supermarket. Food insecurity impacts minorities the most. CDC found this out about racial disparities. From a March 2020 survey, we know that 44% of adults were food insecure in the past 30 days among households with food incomes that were less than 250% of the federal poverty level. There were higher percentages of food insecurity among non-Hispanic, Black adults, Hispanic or Latino adults, and people of other races or ethnicity compared to non-white or Asian adults. The USDA definition of a food desert is a place where the store is 1 mile away. In a study they conducted, they found that 10,000 stores opened in 2010 to 2015. But out of all those stores, only 250 were grocery stores. Having only 250 stores open out of 10,000 is bad because in most food deserts, they only have access to a convenience store. Those stores might only sell snacks and junk food, compared to whites that have 4 times more supermarkets than minorities in their community. According to Feeding America, there are 42 million people, 1 in 8 people, and 13 million kids that are food insecure in 2021. Feeding America had this information regarding the racial disparities of food insecurity. Significant racial disparities in food insecurity that existed before COVID-19 will remain in the wake of the pandemic. Feeding America projects that 21% of Black individuals, 1 in 5 may experience food insecurity in 2021, compared to 11% of white individuals, 1 in 9. Share Our Strength's No Kid Hunger campaign states that they were facing new levels of child hunger, and that is unprecedented in recent decades. Out of the 30 million kids that qualified for free and reduced lunch, only 15% of those kids have been receiving their lunch from school during the pandemic. About 1/3 of kids are faced with food insecurity due to COVID-19.
Restraining Forces SNAP, also known as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, provides money for food for needy families and helps purchase healthy food. The expansion of SNAP has been met with major pushback from Congress and lobbyists that say it is too expensive and they encourage handouts. Other factors that cause food insecurity are age, lack of training, lack of education, economic instability, and lack of money to buy affordable and fresh foods.
$1.6 million households in North Carolina are food insecure. 24.6% of children in North Carolina are food insecure. Schools closed due to COVID, making it hard for students who relied on school for food. More than 70 million learners in the U.S. are affected by school closures.
Poverty in America is not only geographical, it's also racial. African Americans are more than twice as likely to live in poverty than white Americans. But it's Native Americans who have the highest poverty rate of any race in the country, and this is even higher for those who live on reservations. Poverty in America is not only geographical, it's also racial. African Americans are more than twice
39.5 million people are in a food desert. That's 12.8% of the U.S. population. More than 100,000 restaurants and drinking establishments closed during the pandemic. The closing put people out of work and made abnormalities where people eat and drink.
The food program will help the less fortunate or people who just don't have a job in general get a better life. The program will require the government to give money and aid with purchasing food, providing rental assistance, and providing on-the-job training through internships. Our program will last after the pandemic ends. Feeding America. Feeding America has given people with food insecurities 6 billion meals last year. They offer programs to help such as Kids Cafe, Mobile Pantry Program, school pantry program, and disaster food assistance. Call to action. In general, food insecurity has to stop. So as a community, we'll try to end food insecurity by doing these things. Spreading awareness, donating to local food banks, and keeping track of food insecurity in our community.